Week. So excited. Tonight is all about the retail experience. I am your host, Edmunds. No. I'm the vice chair of the Philadelphia Fashion and Garment Industry Task Force, a strategic brand advisor, and also the designer chair for Philly Fashion Week and the founder of Showroom 77. I am so excited for our panel this evening. We have Edgy Benson of New York, CEO, founder. We have Clifton Wilson of the Clifton Wilson brand, designer, founder. And tonight we're going to explore, in general, honestly, when you really dive in and look at the retail experience. A lot of designers, and for example, the reason why I even felt for Philadelphia to originally, before create a showroom, is because a lot of designers are trying to navigate how to go from direct to customer to really break into the retail sector. And when you're trying to figure that out, I mean, there's figuring out who's your target. You know, first you're figuring out who's your target customer. But when you look at retail, who's your target store? How do you even navigate to know what stores to approach? How do you get into a store? What is the process? What do you have to be prepared with? A lot of designers don't even think of sometimes the basics in regard to minimums, manufacturing. You know, it's great, you can get picked up, you can go into a store, but can you produce what you need to that the store is going to order? It's different when you're dealing with a small boutique as opposed to, let's say, when you're dealing with a department store, you know? So we're going to dive into some of those experiences as designers, business owners, with how we started, how we found our fit. Because really it's when you start, you have to find where you fit, your need, and how did you navigate through retail. So let's start with how did you find your fit and some background in your company.
So my name is Edmunds. Benson. I am Nigerian. And I own a company called ENNUI. We are a solutions provider for designers. What we do is work with designers to actualize whatever vision that they have or whatever they want to create. Whether it's a bag or a shoe, coat, jacket, whatever it is. My job is to listen to you and to help you make that a reality. That's what my company does. We do that for brands all over the world. We do work for Rhodes, a lot of names that we do that I can't drop, but we do private collections for brands for stores like Rhodes. We're in 8 countries. We develop textiles, accessories. We essentially exist to solve your problems. We exist to solution around whatever you need. And for me, that was a niche that I found. I found that my niche, although I went to design school, I didn't know I was going to be employable. So I wanted to be able to employ myself. And I worked on kind of acquiring the kind of skills that you need to work for yourself while I was in fashion school. So I was focused on making sure that I could patterns very well, I could drape, I could sew. I could sew and I could tailor. They're 2 different things. You know? So by the time I finished school, I just set up my company. Again, I didn't think I was employable. I was fresh out of Africa. I didn't know anything about racism, but after 4 years in school, you get a hang of it. You don't think you're probably going to get the kind of job you wanted. And I didn't know if I had the temperament to work. You know, I really felt like I was equipped enough to break out my own. So that was me finding my niche. but I was very lucky. Um, we set up our company to develop collections for people. We didn't even know what that would mean, but we knew that we wanted to serve other designers. But we were very good at making patterns. I had a partner, and so we got a job. It was more like an inquiry, like, could you do this? From a very famous design company. And we knocked it out of the park. And that became us being the manufacturer, and the developers for like Line, Kate Spade. And you're in New York, so the names are definitely going to be big. So eventually, we got really good at doing this. And then we scaled. By scaling, we started to delve into, if I'm making patterns for you, you have to take them somewhere else for someone to make songs for you. So we scaled into something. And as that became achievable, we thought, okay, well, if you're doing a sample, I mean, there's not really a lot of money in developing, because you're just developing a single idea. And so we thought, maybe we could be the one that manufacture these things for you. So we got our first manufacturing job. So we worked on setting up a factory, which we still own till today. And but that was our scaling, But in terms of retail, I think as a product, first of all, your granular thing is a product. You have to develop your product, because retail is this function of product. You have to have the product to retail it. So I would say, for me, we own a few brands now, so we're fairly involved in retail. And what we see is, so products don't exist in a void. Products exist in a story. And the story is your brand, right? So your investment is in creating a brand, because your story creates villages for your products. You want to create your product and you want to put them in your village that you've created because of the stories you've told about the ideas that you have. So today, retail has really evolved. It's not, because the product itself has evolved. Now products exist physically, they exist virtually, and in retail outlets, physical, online, NFTs, all kinds of stuff are growing now. So there are so many opportunities for us as a people, for every iteration of retail process, for every new nuance in how we sell or make products. There's so many opportunities for us to be good at technology, to be good at telling our fashion stories, our product stories. There's so many things. But retail itself continues to evolve. The brick and mortar store people thought it was dead because of Amazon and all this other stuff. But I think the brick and mortar store is like the newspaper. With the internet, we thought it would die, but it didn't. These things evolve, they reinvent themselves, and it's us reimagining. So for me, I would say, how do we get into retail? How do we, as a people, how do we become good at retail? Let's get good at our products first. Let's get good at telling the story of these products. Let's get good at creating villages for our products because of the stories that we told about them. And then let's sell the product into these villages that we created.
And from what you've talked about, two things that I really draw from what you said is, one, you made yourself a resource. So you built yourself up, you went from a startup to being a resource. You started with not even knowing if you were employable, to make yourself the resource to be employed. Then, which you really pointed on, was the fact of re-evolving, which as a designer, as a brand, as a product, you have to be a chameleon within the markets. Markets change. You have brick and mortar, you have online, like what you're saying with NFTs and where we're going. And even just for where we are in the situation of being sitting in a space that's in a mall, and what malls have gone through and had to try to reimagine over time,
Yeah.
that we're in a space of, as a business and in fashion, always are going to have to evolve. Clifton.
I can say with starting your brand, I think everyone has their own journey. And before you start that journey, you have to have the passion first. I think that's always been my drive, is that I always had the passion that I wanted to start my own thing. My brand, before I started the brand now, Clifton Wilson, was Armstrong Wilson. I was a co-owner of this brand, and my partner and I, we started from scratch. We met at the Art Institute that was here in Philadelphia, and we started from scratch. We started with pocket squares. That was what we wanted. With me, I always had a passion for suits. Suits has always been my passion. And I remember my ex-partner and I, we always wanted to get into men's clothing, men's suits. We always wanted something dressy. And I went to one person who I knew, and I always give her flowers, but it was Angela. This was years and years, and over, I mean, man, it could have been like 15 years. I mean, I know Angela for over 20 years, but when we really started getting our brand together, I went to Angela, and she actually helped me format the plan. Because with me, I always kind of went off to him. You always, I mean, to this day, I freestyle everything I do. I'm not the most structured person, but I have a vision and I keep it in my mind, and everyone always tells me I have to put it on paper first. But Angela helped me navigate those thoughts that was in my brain all the time. And I think our first journey was to actually get into brick and mortar store with retailers was when we did a trade show. And we did a trade show out in New York at the Javits Center. If people don't know what the trade show is, that's when you buy your booth, you buy a space. And it can be the size of a restaurant, just a small little space, and you might pay $5,000 for the space. And you put your product on that table. And you pray that all these buyers who own these mom and pop stores, from Boyd's to Bloomingdale's to Saks, you pray that they love your product and that they will stop and actually place an order.
Like, they don't just walk up to the booth all the time. Right, that's the one thing people don't realize with trade shows, right? You're going, you're sitting there, you make your booth, and then you say, okay, I'm going to build it, and they will come, right?
Yeah.
No, you could be sitting there and hardly, you could be in a situation where hardly anybody comes. You can send out invitations,
Yeah.
but you have to have something within your product that if you're in a room of hundreds of other brands, what about your brand stands out to make that person walk down that aisle,
Exactly.
stop, it's your booth, and if you only have a few minutes, or if you only have a few seconds to sell that brand, what are you going to say? What's going to be the difference that's going to give you a big order or keep that person walking?
No, it was.
And that was a really big deal on that show.
That was a big deal for us. I remember before we went to the show, we paid $5,000 for a table. And look, I'm talking about a table the size of this one right there, just a table.
Like a
$5,000 for that table, and you know, I was a FedEx driver. Like, I was working FedEx, so I was literally saving up all my money to get into the show. And I remember talking to Angela, and I was always confident of myself. We was always confident of my product, but we wasn't sure who these buyers was. And I know that that space wasn't necessarily a lot of us in that space. So when we got the printout of all the designers who was in there, it was from Sean John. This was when Diddy had his brand. I mean, he had his booth down there. It was like 3 floors high.
Yeah.
You know, we had a table. We had a booth where people can walk in with elevators, kind of thing.
Yes.
Ralph Lauren was down. It was about 300 or 400 brands in there, and we had a table. You know, these newcomers had tables, and I remember talking to Angela, and I said, you know what? We put $5,000 into this table. I mean, to this show, but I'm afraid that people won't take us seriously because of our skin, our color, our race. Because when we looked at the printout, it was only 2 other black companies in this whole entire 300 places. So we just figured people was going to walk by us. And I was trying to explain to Angela, well, maybe I should get my friend who's Asian and my other friend who's white and just represent the brand for us, and we just step back so people can at least, you know, do those. And Angela's like, no, like she pretty much convinces, like, this is us, this is who we are, this is our brand. And me, I wasn't thinking so much about that. I was thinking about the $5,000. You know, I was thinking like, I want to make my money back. You know.
But I hope you're making that back.
No, you didn't. I was thinking about, I just want to get my money back for the most part. But that show was a 3-day show, and I think we did like $30,000 or $40,000. That for that one show. And it was because, again, I give Angela the credit, but she held her ground. She stood her ground. Again, where if you want to navigate retailers, you have to know what stores you want to get in. I didn't care if a mom and pop store was selling, you know, bags of chips and sodas, and they just wanted pocket squares for people to wipe their mouth. I was just going to give it to them just so I can get a check. Angela was like, no. It have to be a certain level because this is your market, this is your brand. Our pocket squares was retailing for, and this is a pocket square, handkerchiefs, pocket squares. It was retailing for $55 to $80. And she's like, your market is going to be people, you know, at this store. So it's going to be Nordstrom's and Bloomingdale's and Saks and Boyd's. And so all the people who's coming through, she was actually checking the quality of like their stores and their systems just so we can be at that target market that we wanted. And she also did minimums.
And so that was minimums. So the first day, the show, and this is why this point of what happened was important, because this was learned the first day that helped him that weekend double the sales. He had an interesting display to the squares. It was a cigar box. And you had the option with the cigar box to get your nameplate customized on the front of the cigar box, right? I don't know if you hear it.
I can hear it.
Can you hear it?
I can hear right now. I have to repeat all that again.
I just have to speak loud. Got it. All right, so the cigar box was the display for the pocket squares. At that time period, he had made his minimum 10. The cigar is $50, right? So here you get a minimum of 10 squares, and the upsell piece is if you go in and get the cigar box for $50, and you get your customized store nameplate on the cigar box, and that's something that could be displayed on your boutique counter, right? But what I noticed is, but the cigar box holds 20 squares. So why is the minimum 10? Instead, make the minimum 20. That 20 squares then automatically is going to upsell the cigar box that holds your 20 square display. And the moment that we switched and went and did that, everybody was ordering cigar boxes of 20 squares just to go and get the full display, which doubled sales within just that time period of the weekend. So from the one day that was at 10, by the next day, it was 20,000 in sales already, just from making that one change. And recognizing that and thinking that on a retail level of not just as a designer, but think of from the buyer perspective of that and how they would display it in the store. Another thing that we did as part of that weekend was, I said, okay, you have your product, you have the branding, all this stuff looks great, nice, you guys came with the suits. Are you protected? Do you have a sales terms agreement? Right? They said, well, what's that? Right? I said, so wait, so you came to a trade show, but you're gonna write an order, but you don't have a sales terms agreement? So the importance of that is to say, okay, then when I go and I make this sale with whoever it is, these are my terms of what it is for you to order. These are my terms in which you have of shipping, delivery, when you can make a return, things like that. Those sales terms protect you as a designer, as a business with that. Because when you get, it's one thing on what we're saying right now, even on brick and mortar, or what we call small boutiques are called those mom and pops. But when you get into department stores, which eventually you ended up going into and scaling into there, what was the difference in your experience in as well? What do you feel was the difference in getting into dealing at a large retail production department store level from where you started?
Yeah, I mean, I can say the difference was, again, money, finances. People think when so when we got an order for Nordstrom, and before we got our order from Nordstrom, I think for a year and a half, we drove and flew to maybe about 20 Nordstrom stores to do trunk shows, where we told Nordstrom, okay, if you give us a store location, we'll bring our product there, we'll work the weekend there, and we'll stand there and we'll sell our merchandise to the customers, educate the people and everything. So our first location was King of Prussia, and I think that one day, our first day, we did 100 pocket squares that day, and that was like really good. And the thing is, I used to work at Nordstrom's and King of Prussia, so they wanted to see if it was just a fluke because I had a lot of friends who was working there and I was in, local. So then they decided to send us to Jersey, and then we did really good in Jersey, and then they decided to send us to LA, and we did like all the Nordstroms down California, I think, and then Texas, and we just started going to every different location. It took us about a year and a half, 2 years of doing trunk shows before we even got any PO. So if I took 100 pocket squares and I sold 100 pocket squares, Nordstrom, they cut me my little check from there, and they took their money from there. I had to prove myself first that the product could actually sell in their stores. So a whole year and a half of traveling on our own dime. I mean, it could have been like 6 of us in hotel rooms and, driving from here to Florida at that time. And, we had to prove ourselves. And that was my passion, that I knew that the product belonged in there. But before, with mom and pop stores, it was easier. Mom and pop place an order, you box it up, you ship it out to them, you get your money before they ship out. With Nordstrom, it was different because you had to have barcodes. Everything had to be like an EDI compliant, so all those barcodes on the back of the product you have to scan so Nordstrom's could bring them up. Well, that comes out of your money that you have to pay up front. So for me to get barcodes, that was about $2,500 of my own money just to get the order. Then you have to do cashbacks. Then you have to wait like 60 days before you get paid. So you're spending your money up front. And then the other part is chargebacks. So basically they'll say, okay, we're gonna give you $100,000 for this order. You'll probably spend $20,000 just making a product, just getting your barcodes of your own money up front. And then you have to ship it out, and then you're waiting 60 days for a check. And sometimes you think you're getting a $100,000 check, but then Nordstrom would say, oh, but $35,000 didn't sell, so we're going to send that merchandise back to you, and we're going to cut you a check for this. That's how department stores operate. So sometimes when you think you're getting into a department store, you're actually getting into debt. You're not really thinking like some people think you're making it. So for me, I always try to tell people when they're trying to navigate into these retail space that a lot of times it's easier to try to get, I'd rather have 100 mom and pop stores than be in 100 Nordstrom stores. That's just me. Because you can get a different buyer next season, and that buyer don't even pick you up. So there's been times where I might got a big order because me and my buyer was really good together, and my buyer could place an order for $150,000, and you're thinking you're good, like, all right, I'm good. And then next thing you know, you get an email. He said, hey, I left Nordstrom's, I'm going to another company. And then the new buyer come in and say, no, I want to promote all Gucci ties and all Louis Vuitton ties, so we're not going to pick you up now. So overnight, you just lost 100 department stores, 100 stores. So I'd rather have 100 mom and pop stores and have 100 different relationships, because you can't lose 100 mom and pop stores overnight. If you're doing that, then you're doing something wrong. Now, you might lose 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but you still got 97 more stores giving you checks every season. So that was something I had to learn. Growing my brand was, I always thought, oh, you get into Nordstrom's, you get into Bloomingdale's, you get into Saks, I'm set, I'm good. I'm selling to Nordstrom's now, and it's doing well. I'm selling to Nordstrom's online as well, it's doing well. But my buyer left last season, and he got sent to the denim department. And that was like a nightmare for me because, my new buyers, I email them, they take, 2 weeks just for them to email me back. You call, you can't get in contact with anyone, and then I just got my old buyer back yesterday, so that was like the best day of my life because he actually reached out. So when you see your money going down, you're like, man, I gotta, Nordstrom gotta do something for me. And my old buyer literally just reached out yesterday and said that he's back because he didn't like the jean department, and he's back. And we had a good conversation yesterday, and we're launching a Christmas collection now that we're working on. And then I'm doing the 24th, I think. I always get my seasons wrong, but yeah, so that's always been my journey with it. Nordstrom's always been, I've been selling with Nordstrom's for years now, for my last brand, and when my partner and I decided to go our separate ways, I started my brand 2 years ago, and that's in Nordstrom's as well now. So it's, it's doing pretty well, but the journey is always going. It's always kind of up and down at times.
Something I wanted to touch on, Edgy, when you were talking in the beginning on what you were doing in development, you mentioned pattern making. And something that's important in retail is fit. I remember a situation where getting a designer into a store, and then the designer decided to try another direction, right? So they were doing basic ready-to-wear. They decided to go ahead and make some swimwear and kind of go around the rep and go straight to the buyer and get the sale in on the swimwear end, right? But then later I got a call from the buyer, and they said, we have a problem. We have an entire swimwear line that nobody can fit. And I said, well, that's nothing I can help you with because you didn't go through me. You went straight through the designer on a side deal situation. What it sounds like is the designer never used a fit model and had improper patterning or sizing. How important do you feel? I mean, we know that it is an incredibly important, but for someone with experience with
You have with your factory, with your development company, where you say, these are the core things about my brand. This is who it fits. If it's like now we have a lot of non-binary things, so that means that things that need to fit a certain curvy way can't be that way anymore. They'll be more democratic for the fit. So fitting itself is a core thing. And I think as a designer, you have to be fully aware of that. Like, who are you fitting? Who were there yesterday and who are there today, Yesterday they may have loved something curvy, feminizing. Today they don't feel that way anymore. But they still love the brand, And how do you innovate? How do you reinvent yourself? So we do 95% of Cynthia Rowley. And I think that she is the best at just psyching out our clients, our customers, knowing where they are going in terms of how they feel about who they are, you know? So she has a lot of items that are just non-binary, you know? And I think she's really, really, she's really mastered that. And you know, she's got the same bodies for 20 years. She just evolves them, you know? You don't have to have a ton of bodies. Get your feet in place, nuance around it, so you don't lose your customers as their bodies change and move, you know? But yeah, fit is important. Fit is a conversation with yourself, with your fit model, you're not taking enough interest in your buyer, your customer, your wearer.
It's a good meeting.
And from what you mentioned, you said specs, and then if you remember from what we were talking about earlier, we said minimums. So when you talk about fit and you say specs and you say minimums, I always say, let's say, for example, your minimum, being your minimum order to your buyer was 6, right? That means that gives you, let's say, 2 small, 2 medium, 2 large, right? That's what they're ordering in that size run. But what size is your size small? What size is your size medium and your large? Is your small a fit a 2 to 4? Does it then go a 6 to 8? Does it go to 10 to 12? Something I noticed with a lot of designers, even just in dealing within Philly Fashion Week, is designers will go and design by just a specific model, not by the general standard size or the fit size, right? So what happens is, if all of a sudden that model is not available, now you have an issue that you're trying to go and fill someone else into that slot, but it's not a standard fit that, let's say, that 4 or that 6 that could have just gone with any other person. You're going so specific, you know? So in retail, when you go and shop, unless you're in a situation of couture and you're going custom, if someone if a buyer is buying and they need to know, well, what is your actual size? What is your size range? That was such a good example too, to say that one person's 6 could be someone else's 4, you know, on a cut, or vice versa. You know, it is just so incredibly important to understand fit and patterning from the beginning stages of what you're doing. So,
I was just going to say something. These days, for us especially, so when you have, let's say you show 10 styles, and you've gone to market and these styles are now, you've got orders. So you have to remember that the patterns that you use for your runway, those are just for runway. Now you've got real market orders. These are real people who are going to wear clothes. So that's why you have these house models. They're really important for you. So now your fit models, your runway models are probably like patterns are like size 4, you know, size 2 sometimes. So size 2 doesn't exist anymore. But when you go to production, now we have to do production patterns. All of that almost goes like it's you pin it, you know. Now you create patterns for production. And that is, so when you go from 2 to 10, that's it. From 12 upwards, again that pattern changes because the human body changes from size. After size 10, those dynamics are different. So if you're doing from size 2 to 10, you're creating maybe your grading rule is like 1.5 or 1 inch, you know, which is like it is 1 inch between sizes. So every seam is maybe a quarter or an inch, you know, until you get your 1 inch, right, or 1.5 inch. After size 10, all of that changes because from size 12, the body's a little bit different, you know. So it's you understanding that when you do your specs from size 2 to 10, they're going to be a certain way, but from size 12 to 18, they're going to look different. Nothing to be scared about. It's just really normal, you know. But that's an understanding that you need to. It's a little bit technical, but it helps you at the market end because then you don't get returns, you know. But they are all a factor of fit, you know, just understanding your specs. Yeah.
I'm going to start with you on this one. Now we've gone through FIB, we've gone to breaking in, but a lot of designers try to figure out price, how to set the price of the garments and items. Just from speaking from your experience, what within your business, did you use or gauge between, in terms of the difference, your accessories, pocket squares, what set your price, what contributed to your different levels of price change, and also based on where you were in retail?
I think with myself, it was knowing which stores I wanted to go into, knowing my fabrics, knowing my customers. The stores that we were selling our pocket squares to, these guys was buying suits for $2,000, $3,000. So I knew that they didn't want a $20 pocket square. I knew they didn't want a $40 pocket square. And the way how we stood out from everyone else was that we didn't use silk at first. It was cashmeres, it was your linens, it was just your finer fabric. So we may went to a store, to a fabric store, and we may see some cashmere that was $140 a yard. And out of that 1 yard, I could probably make, say like 8 or 9 pocket squares out of that 1 yard. Now I can sell that, if I was doing it off of my website, I could sell it for a certain price. Or if I was wholesaling it to Nordstrom's, I could sell it to a certain price just to make sure that I make my money back. But I think it's always about knowing your target, your customers, how they think, how they actually, think. Some people won't buy something because it's too affordable. If you mark it up half all the way up, then people, Nordstrom's made a mistake where I sent them my cufflinks, and they put my cufflinks on their website as a wholesale price. And yeah, it was still coming on somewhere. But people didn't buy them at the time. I got like 4 sales for that day when they put it up, and I had to reach out to the buyers, and but the thing was, it was up there for like a week, and I didn't realize that it was up there as a wholesale price. And as soon as they marked them up to full price what they was, that's when they started to sell out. So I think people generally know like where they're going to. You can go to Shirt Corner Plus for like a suit, or you can go to Boys and spend $2,000 on a suit, but then you want a $150 necktie. Now, I never knew people would shop that way until we actually did our own homework, and I worked at Nordstrom's for 4 years, and I started selling guys $2,000, $3,000 suits. I was selling guys dress shirts that was $250, and I'm like, these people are crazy, because I was raised by going down a second market and getting a suit, a shirt, a tie, socks, shoes, everything for $49.99. That's how I was raised. So I was never aware that people would spend that kind of money. So when I was working at Nordstrom's, that's when suits was really my passion. But I knew I couldn't just break into making my own line of suits. And that's always been my advice to people is find one thing that you're good at, your niche first. So as I looked around Nordstrom's store, I seen that it was all these nice cashmere suits and cashmere sports coats, and everybody was doing this, but I didn't see one cashmere pocket square on their table. So that's when I started buying my own fabric that was, nice fabric, and putting it out there that way. And people started buying it. So it's just knowing your target and your price. I know with Nordstrom, they always want at least a 60% margins for them. For me, I try to
So if you could give an example or that, what was the wholesale price?
Oh, so for instance, if so I have cufflinks that I had made, and they was retailing for $95 on Nordstrom's website, and I think they put them up there for $20, somewhere around there, or 25 or somewhere. And say for lapel flowers, my lapel flowers, I have them, listed on there. I think they was wholesaling them for retailing them for $7 on their website, when they was actually $22. So it's little things like that, but you have to, and with me, I'm big into packaging. So all my pocket squares was coming into their own boxes. So I would spend money on packaging because my brand wasn't as big as my competitors. So when people go to a Nordstrom's or they go into these mom and pop stores and they seen a Burberry pocket square on the table and they seen an Armani pocket square on the table, they're just there with the fabric. But when they see mine, they see the actual box with packaging. It was just displayed better, and I think that's what made people, pick it up more. On my website, on Nordstrom's website, 90% of my sales come from women. Women shopping for their men, shopping for their husbands. And I think women are more geared to things that just display prettier than things that just bunched into a group of things. So that was my initial goal when I went to Nordstrom's, was I wanted my product to stand out more. And when I went to mom and pop stores, I wanted my product to stand out more. So I'll pay the extra, $1,000 for packaging because I know that it's going to catch the eyes of my consumer more. So you just have to brand it out. But my initial goal was actually getting into suits. But I wanted to start small. I wanted to start with something that I can handle, that I can scale. So we started with the pocket square, and then after the pocket square, I think we did a pocket square for 5 years, and we got them into 60 stores we was in stores in Belgium, Singapore, different parts of the world that we was retailing. And then it was easier when we wanted to introduce our neckties, to introduce the neckties because they was already familiar with that. I think, I was never a good designer. I'm on my sewing machine. I could get on my sewing machine if I have to. When I first got my order with Nordstrom, I made every single pocket square, everything I did on my own. We did a lot of packaging. We did everything pretty much on our own. But when you have designers starting out and they want to go to big stores, I always try to say start small. Start with something that you can manage, that you can get into. Suits was my final goal, but pocket squares was my start. Neckties came. The next thing you know, we started doing cufflinks and bracelets and socks, and we're working our way up. And I think that's what people have to do sometimes, is work your way up instead of coming with a whole entire collection sometimes. Some people come with 80 different things, and it's hard to manage that because if that store places an order, you now have to be responsible to make that jacket, those pants, that shirt, those socks, this, that, and that. I just wanted pocket squares. That's it, but my goal was suits, and you have to have your end goal, but if you want to start big, then you have to see this guy right here, because he can manage with all those things, with the patterns and do those manufacturings and stuff like that. But I made a name for myself with my brand, with those accessories first. And this year we just picked up a client, 2 clients, Hickey Freeman and Samuelson. Those are 2 suit brands that I used to actually sell at Nordstrom's. And they're in 800 stores across the country. And they're 100 years old. One of them, we just celebrated their 100th anniversary, but they came to us and we're actually designing all their accessories now for their brand. So it's it's a blessing, it's a journey, but we made our name for ourselves starting small, with pocket squares first, and we was just the best at doing with our fabrics and just standing out a little bit.
I was just going to add something pricing from from the manufacturing side and from the volume side of it. So normally, there's a rule of thumb. So at the retail end, you want to price your product at 5 times cost. At wholesale, you want to be around 2.5 times cost. Right? So that's really like basically a rule of thumb. So if you paid $2 to make it, you want to, let's say that you paid $2 to make a pair of jeans and you made 10 of them. So that's like $20. So you want to price it at retail where you 30% of your inventory paid for it that you have, all your costs is covered at 30% of the inventory at the retail end, and 50% of the inventory at the wholesale end. Then after that, you have room to make discounts or to just keep it the way it is. You can decide to just milk the market and no discounts. But rule of thumb is 30% of the inventory at full price should cover your costs. And that works out to 5 times, about 5 times cost. So if you made it for $2, your retail price should be about 10. So that's, I'm just discussing pricing. That's like a rule of thumb for pricing. I mean, you can go up or down from that, depending on quality and your perception of your brand, because pricing is perception.
But that definitely is important because I remember one time dealing with a designer who had priced her collection on wholesale and didn't realize she hadn't sold anything at that point. But when I went back over her collection and her pricing, I noticed some discrepancies. And when I did the final numbers, I said to her, do you know if you actually would have placed an order with the buyer, you would have made $1? Out of which she had in the value of what that piece in that outfit was, she would have made $1. All of her collection was mispriced, and she didn't realize at that point. She had a beautiful lookbook, she had item numbers, she had it packaged, it looked great from the outside, but if it would have been handed in and it would have been written, she would have been at a loss and would have made $1 at the end of the day. So these points are, it's so important. It's so important to know that you're pricing things correctly. A lot of designers, sometimes when you're going and you're making things yourself and you're not at a point where you have manufacturing and you're starting up and you're just sewing yourself and in your studio and you say, okay, I'm going to price it at 4 times the amount because that's what I'm worth for sitting and sewing it, and I'm sewing to the point so my fingers bleed. But at the end of the day, does the pricing also match the quality of the fabric that you chose? Is it something where, let's say maybe you might have found a piece and is the fabric something, you got that your fabric could have been for this piece maybe only $1 a yard or something, and not as quality of the fabric. It wasn't the cashmeres or the others. And you now want to say, my piece that I'm done in the end, this piece is now worth $3,000 to $5,000. What made that piece, besides the time period that it took you to make it, worth $3,000 to $5,000? What of that piece and the quality and the construction and the stitching and what you're putting into that, your notions, all of those things, what makes that piece that price? And when you can sell it to a customer at a price, you've now proven that you can sell it, right?
There's something else I want to say. When people talk to me about doing work for them, I ask them, what is your retail price? A lot of the times I get a lot of resistance from that because people think if they tell me their thing is $1,000, I'm going to charge them $1,000 to make it. Oh, you guys can't hear me. I'm sorry. No, I was just saying, when people come to me and I say to you, I say to them, first question we ask you, what is your retail price? And they say, we get a lot of resistance because people think, oh, if I tell them my sale, my price, they're going to charge me high. No, we ask you that because we want to make sure that you are able to price your product correctly. So if you tell me your retail is $50, then I tell you, okay, $50. That means you can't make this for more than $10, right? So now if you're telling me that this is a cashmere coat and you're selling for $50, and I'm going to say, well, are we going to use fake cashmere or real cashmere, right? But the question is really just to understand what your pricing is so that we can tell you where your baselines are. You know, if your product is retailing at $10, you can't make it for more than $2. You won't make money if you make it above $2. If you make it at $3 or $4, you'll be crawling because you won't make any money. Yeah. So your goal is to work with your manufacturer to make sure that your baselines are met. You know, my dress is $40. You cannot make it for more than $8 or $10. It really is. That is really it. Above that, you're not making money. Above that, you're not going to be profitable. So just have the conversations. It's all in the conversation. It's all about finding alternatives. What is so, like right now, you want to make this amazing flowing silk dress, right? Well, and you want to sell it for $200. Well, maybe silk is not what you want to use. Maybe you want to use a rayon. It gives you the same flow and everything. And the customers love rayon, you know? But it keeps you at baselines that are workable for you. It gives you an incredible product. But all of these are conversations that we can have, right? It's conversations towards building the product.
And for manufacturing, a lot of designers here locally really do starve for good manufacturing resources. There's always the debate of if you have manufacturing locally or if you really have to go outside of the U.S. to go into manufacture, looking at outside of the U.S. being less expensive. But if you could speak to the benefits or the pros and cons of navigating manufacturing in itself and sourcing of a manufacturer.
So I think one of the most important things you have to understand is your product is number one, it's paramount. Now, how do you make this product? And sometimes people come to me and say, I want to make this product in the United States. I tell them, I too would love to make it in the United States for you. Unfortunately, at the moment, I don't, you know. And there are choices to do that. One of the reasons we go overseas is it's not about pricing really. Pricing is very relative. Pricing is about the same, you know, at the qualities that you want. It's just, right? Are you able to buy your fabric, get your trims, get everything in one shop, and get the product and prices that are manageable for the customer? Or are you going to piecemeal it where the fabric comes from Turkey and the trims come from there? It all adds up and the product becomes unattainable. So I think you should be flexible in terms of production so that your brands have a chance to live, you know. Discuss with your manufacturer, what are your sustainability goals? What are your production goals? Like, okay, you want to be local, right? Why do you want to be local? Because my customer loves price. Well, can we do anything of that? Can we find compromises where you keep your customer because some part of it is local? It's about your messaging to your customer about that, you know. But I think the biggest thing is making it product. and finding relationships that make your product possible. And you cannot put all these roadblocks in front of you, like it has to be made locally, it has to be this, it has to be that. At the end of the day, your product doesn't get a chance because you've not given it a chance. You know? I think you should find compromises that allows your product to live. You know? So local manufacturing is coming along. It's going to take some time. At the moment, I think denim is where local production is very strong in California, but unit costs remain very low. There are not enough capacity to generate reasonable economies of scale for you to save it. You know, it's too expensive. That does not mean that it's not going to happen, but until it happens, I think you should be amenable to what works for your product. You know, so that it has a chance.
Tell the manufacturing overseas as well as your experience to navigating that.
Yeah, right now I have a good manufacturer that's in Italy that's doing Italian neckties and pocket squares. So I have that relationship with a manufacturer over there. I definitely say once you find a manufacturer and they fit your needs, definitely stay with them, you know, grow with them. So I do have one there, and I'm looking for a manufacturer actually now. I'm actually going down to Charlotte to a gentleman who I met in Chicago at an event, and they have a huge manufacturing system. So I'm going down there because manufacturing is everything. And my first few years, I spent every day on my sewing machine making everything. And to this day, I still turn my machine on. I don't have to do the majority of the stuff, but it's on every day. It was on this morning, it was on last night. But the good thing is with that is that I know my product, and I know that can't really nobody make my product the way how I want it. So I do have the skill that, like in the middle of COVID, when I got an order from Nordstrom, it was 5,000 pieces. And you couldn't find no manufacturer anywhere. It was just no manufacturer had anybody to do anything. And I didn't want to lose that opportunity, so I had to sit down and, as you know, I had to find all the help that I could get, but thank God I had the sewing machines, I have those things, and we sat down and banged out 5,000 pocket squares, 5,000 units, and I had to call Angela, you and your husband, my sisters, everybody, they all came to the house. I ordered pizza, and I was like, look, man, we gotta put barcodes on everything, we gotta box everything up, we gotta press everything, because there was no manufacturer to be found. And I knew I was not gonna lose that opportunity for that event. That was like a blessing that I'm still am, but a small company, because the bigger brands are the ones who was really getting destroyed during COVID because they couldn't get the manufacturer, they couldn't get stuff shipped in time, they couldn't do anything. So we was much smaller, so we was that last resort when a department store reached out and said, hey, can you give us 5,000 units? All I knew was that I needed a Red Bull, some good music, and I'll get you 5,000 units. And it turned out that we was able to do it, So, but now, I've been sewing for 24 years. I'm over it. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm over it. With me, I just, sometimes I can't let go. Of it, because I'm addicted to fabric, I'm addicted to just creating this stuff. But now it's at the point where you have to bring the professionals in and use people who specialize in that. So that's been my struggle now, is getting the best manufacturer who can create what I want, and it could do it. So that's what I'm doing this year, is really going out, finding, and I found a couple in California, but the one in Charlotte I think is going to be a really good one.
Manufacturing is helpful if you find the right person, because they're your friends forever, They're really your friends. it's not even a price thing, it's not a cost thing. It's just you getting your stuff done. You have no idea the kind of breaks you get when you have a relationship with a manufacturer. So many things you don't have to pay for. So whether it's local or international, just having that relationship, it's very beneficial.
Both incredible points. And something I want to point out too is, as we've been saying, understand and know your product, right? So even within that, and even within a situation of trust, she knew how to go and make that fix. And she took that weekend to go and to do that, to still have it ready to be able to not miss her lunch that happened on that Monday, right?
That's the worst.
And it can happen. You know, everything's not perfect. What some designers navigate with that, and the difference of overseas to a local, is that if it is local, you also can pop in and see it. You know, you can have your relationship there. If you're overseas, you need to be in good communication with your manufacturer. That's another thing, is to understand the time zones and be in good communication. I know of another situation of a designer who worked with a manufacturer overseas for the first time and sent a picture, not of what they designed. They found a picture on Fashion Nova of what they wanted their piece to look like and sent that to the manufacturer, and then wondered why. Now, they didn't ask for a sample. Manufacturers do give samples, right? You are able to ask for it. You're able. Did you just say free?
I love free.
Can you say that again?
They're free
They're
inside
free?
a contract.
Okay, it's not contract. Okay, all right. So that's a good point to know. You could get samples for free. Because when I was designing my sample wasn't free. It was $75 for that. So I wish I would have known whether it was free. But this designer didn't ask for a sample. Okay, so he spent all this money. Fashion Nova picture. And he gave the manufacturer all the money to make it. He didn't ask for a sample of the fabric that they were going to make it with. He just said stretch it. Okay, so I want it to look like and fit and be poofy and be like this in the picture. And I want stretchy, so I guess that means I want spandex and I want colors. And what he got back, the fit was wrong, fabric was wrong. It was one of those things, if you ever kind of remember back in the day on the Cosby Show and the Gordon Gartrell episode of, you know, nowadays what they say, this is what I ordered, and look, this is what I got. That's what his looked like. And then you're wondering why. And now you've spent so much money, and now it's wasted because you didn't take the time to put in the effort to ask those questions of the manufacturer when you source them. See what's involved in their contracts. Can you get a free sample? Can you get a swatch book? Because in your line, you're allowed to get swatch books, right? You get a big fabric swatch book. So then you're able to see it, feel the fabric, decide what you're choosing from that. Ask about grading. You can make your pattern, but I remember back when I was designing, I had to figure out the patterning, and then I had to take it to a grader. I had to then take my pattern to a grader and then get it graded, and then it came in like a tube, like a roll for the pattern. You know, I did what Clifton did for the longest in satin. I didn't have it down during that time when I did my collection. I didn't have the luxury of the manufacturing, so I was sitting at a sewing machine sewing every day. And you know what? You get to a point that it takes the love out of it for you as a designer. It becomes such a job, you know. So that's why it's important that when you reach that point that you can work to that goal to scale, build your company to where you can get manufacturing, source it, get manufacturing, start off small, build, build those relationships because it's only going to help you in the long run. Here, with that. At this time, I wanted to just, if there was any question, I wanted to give an opportunity, if someone did have a question, to ask anybody on the panel a question.
You're going into bulk production, and if you're bringing products from overseas, how do you calculate your shipping costs, your freight? Is there a standard method to be able to do that, to guesstimate it? As a startup, how would you do that?
So normally for us, after all these years of doing work for so many people, a lot of those things have become really simplified. So we have an idea in terms of weights, what your costs are going to be. We work with a lot of forwarders. So that's part of the logistics side of it, but it's all inside of this package that we would give you. Meaning, of course, you pay for shipping separately, but we're able to estimate it for you.
Yeah, so because if you get an FOB price, and then you would have to probably work on the shipping cost, on your end. As a startup, how do you guesstimate the cost?
So, it depends on fabric weight. Say if you're doing denim, or if you're doing a hoodie, for instance, they're about, depending on the weight of the terry, they're probably about a hoodie and a half per kilo.
Got it.
Right?
Right.
And so, if you have like 10 hoodies, that's probably about 6 kilos, somewhere around there. And the rates, if you're shipping if it's going by boat, maybe 30 cents a kilo, somewhere around there. And if it's coming on a flight, it might be about $1 a kilo, somewhere around there. So there's kind of ways to, if we have to give it to you, we will give you. And we also do LDPs, which is like, it's landed and you get it in your hands. And in that case, we will incorporate the costs of the shipping. It's the same. It's just that we charge it to you as part of the production. We don't itemize it separately for you. But they can be estimated.
Thank you for the question. So at this time, we are concluding, but we will have an opportunity at this point when we do conclude. If you would like to come up to our panel, please meet them, network, ask additional questions. I would like to just thank you both on behalf of Philly Fashion Week for taking time out of your busy schedule. I want to thank everyone in the room for taking time out of your schedule to come and support. Again, happy Fashion Week. And I hope to see you at the rest of the events going on this week. PhillyFashionWeek.org, the schedule, and enjoy.